Hey guys, it's me, Michael Gibbons, and I'm going to react to a very special video that I find very entertaining. Is something about domesticated foxes. Now, I actually did a little bit of research on this before, and if I'm not mistaken, there is a place somewhere in Europe, I think, where they took a bunch of foxes and they were trying to see how far down the line would they go if they were around humans too much. And it turns out, just like dogs, from wolves, they turned out to be more friendly, and their colors changed, and something about their fur and their tails actually curled up like modern dogs. So, something like that is really fascinating to see in your own lifetime. You can actually see the defining line between what makes an animal have to do to be wild and what stuff they lose when they are not wild. So let's just get in on it.
Fox number one. So that is me, locked in a pen in San Diego. And that is a very special red fox from Russia. We're testing whether the fox likes me, because it's actually bred to be friendly towards people. And in that moment, I'm really hoping it passes the test.
I like foxes.
I'm just minding my own business.
Exotic pets are weirdly compelling, especially on social media. They're like a glimpse into this alternate reality where we domesticated raccoons instead of cats and dogs. But they're not really domesticated. Animals like cats, dogs, horses, pigs, we bred them for generation after generation to live alongside humans. Exotic pets are hand-raised, but they're basically still wild animals, with maybe one exception. We drove up into the hills outside San Diego to meet a very few rare animals. They're foxes that are born without any built-in fear or aggression towards humans. They wag their tails at you, they like treats, they're very curious about you, though they are a little camera shy. There's nothing quite like them.
Oh, I got a lick.
We're visiting Amy and David Bassett at their Canid Education and Conservation Center. It's sort of an interactive zoo built to introduce the general public to foxes. The Bassetts got them as pets, but not from an exotic pet breeder. They're the result of a nearly 60-year-long Russian science experiment.
Victor, sit. Sit. Good fox. Good fox.
It all traces back to a Soviet geneticist named Dmitry Belyayev. In the 1950s, Belyayev hit on an idea that was radical for its time: that domesticated animals, like dogs, are friendly to people because of genes that govern their behavior. Meaning, the process that turned wolves into dogs tens of thousands of years ago was essentially evolution. There were friendliness genes that won out in wolves as they adapted to live alongside humans. These foxes exist because of the way Belyayev tested his idea. In 1959, his team began selectively breeding foxes at the Institute of Cytology and Genetics in remote Novosibirsk, Russia. The criterion was simple. The foxes that showed the least fear or aggression when approached by experimenters were allowed to breed. The less friendly foxes weren't. They selected the next generation of foxes the same way, and the next generation, and the next, for decades. Belyayev died in 1985, but the work continued. And by 2004, nearly 70% of the foxes had reached an elite level of friendliness. By some measures, they had domesticated the fox. Which is how, a few years back, two dog lovers found themselves in over their heads.
We had absolutely no idea. They're very cheeky, very mischievous, get into everything, chew and tear everything apart.
David and Amy currently own 5 of the only 10 or 15 Belyayev foxes in the United States. It cost around $9,000 to buy and import one all the way from Siberia, and they came with a learning curve.
We learned quickly that they're not really house trained, so they will poop and pee everywhere. So it's not very easy to have them in your kitchen, say, when they jump on the counters and poop.
The Bassetts have since adjusted to life with foxes, but they've learned that being domesticated is one thing, being man's best friend is another.
while they are certainly tame, they're fascinating and incredible animals, they're still foxes. And when you domesticate a fox, you don't make a dog. You make a domesticated fox, any more than when you domesticate a horse, you make a dog.
So Belyayev did not recreate the dog. But for anyone studying how wolves evolved into dogs, the foxes might still represent a behavioral stepping stone.
They're on a path to doghood, if you like.
Clive Wynne is a professor of psychology at Arizona State. He studies the unique relationship between dogs and people, and the way that dogs go above and beyond simple friendliness towards humans.
Dogs have this emotional availability, I sometimes call it hypersociability, that they are so very, very ready and willing to form emotional relationships.
According to Clive, at least 14,000 years ago, hypersocial dogs emerged from a population of wild wolves. And no one's really sure how it happened.
I mean, that is the million-dollar question, and we don't exactly know.
But the Belyayev foxes might offer a clue. Clive and his team have a simple test to see how far along the foxes are on their path to doghood. And they told us how to carry it out. So the experiment is really simple. I have a 1 meter radius circle all the way around me, and they're going to bring in a fox one at a time into this enclosure. The idea was to see how much of 2 minutes the foxes would spend inside my circle. We tried first with the 3 Belyayev foxes, and one by one, they trotted up, sniffed me, and then relaxed somewhere else. Which has been Clive's experience with the foxes too.
They greet and they interact, and then they move on.
For comparison, we also tested a fox that was hand-reared by humans, but genetically wild. It never set foot inside the radius, and it never relaxed. And for a final contrast, we tested a dog. I gotta ignore you for 2 minutes. Afterwards, we got to spend some more time with the Belyayev foxes, and they were completely tame with us, just not so friendly. Clive and the Bassets suspect that this is because of their early lives as lab animals. They were bred for generations to be friendly, but then barely socialized as youngsters. And that's important, too.
The fact that I'm such a nice guy isn't just the beautiful genes that I inherited from my parents, but the experiences of life that I've had along the way.
Clive and his team plan to keep studying fox behavior, to build out a roadmap for how dogs became dogs. But locked inside each of those foxes is another roadmap, one that might help explain
Let me see that again.
lives as lab animals. They were bred for generations to be friendly, but then barely socialized as youngsters. And that's important, too.
Yeah.
The fact that I'm such a nice guy isn't just the beautiful genes that I inherited from my parents, but the experiences of life that I've had along the way.
Clive and his team plan to keep studying fox behavior, to build out a roadmap for how dogs became dogs. But locked inside each of those foxes is another roadmap, one that might help explain domestication in any animal.
In some situations, it's like a single gene. In some situations, still a few genes.
Anna Kukekova is a professor of animal sciences at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Since 2002, she's been collaborating with the Institute in Russia on genetics research. Her goal is to reach the absolute core of the fox experiment, the specific genes involved in fox domestication. And a few weeks ago, she and her team published a paper in Nature, Ecology, and Evolution that made a lot of progress.
Now we know that there are about 100 regions in fox genome which in some way can contribute to some behaviors, tame behavior, friendly behavior, or aggressive behavior.
Anna's research is valuable because it directly compares the genes of wild and domesticated foxes. We can do that with wolves and dogs, but we can't infer as much about it. As dogs evolved, friendliness just wasn't the only trait that mattered. For example, they also had to digest human food. So we can see which genes changed from wolves to dogs, but it's harder to know whether those really are behavior genes. On the other hand, there was only one fox trait that Belyayev selected for, friendliness towards humans. So here, it's a little easier to associate behavior with DNA.
Can we actually nail down some regions to a single gene and try to demonstrate that this gene actually has effect on behavior? And we were successful. And
This is such a big deal because there's a lot of overlap in mammalian genes. So these genes that Anna found, they could help us understand domestication across the board. And given that, it's possible that we could use gene editing tools to domesticate entirely new animals in the lab.
Really?
Maybe.
Yeah, we're thinking about that. I have doubts that we ever will be able to create mouse which wags its tail. I don't think it will work, but we'll see.
But back in reality, where does that leave the foxes? They're still being bred for the experiment, but they're also trickling out into the world as pets, which puts them in a strange no man's land between a wild animal and a companion. They were not created the same way dogs were, and they're certainly not dogs now. But if you know to look for it, there's a hint of something familiar about them.
You take the short moments when they're scared, they'll come to you. If you're open to it and you realize what that means, what's the significance of this, semi-wild animal who just came to you for comfort, and that's kind of what you have to understand in order to bond with a fox. It's these small moments that have huge significance to them.
So one thing we didn't talk about was that even though Belyaev only selected for friendliness, there were a lot of physical changes to the foxes too. Their coats were different, their ears got floppier, even their skulls changed. It's called domestication syndrome, and you should read about it because it is wild.
Wow, that was good. God, Jesus. I don't know where that came from, but what I want to know is, could the same be done with other animals, specifically birds or primates? Because those are the animals that I'm planning on getting to one day in the future. But like he said, even though these animals have been hand-raised, they're not exactly domesticated, gone through the thousands of years it took for dogs to become what they are today. But I would at least want to try to put it in that direction because I actually want to get a few exotic animals. I'll probably get into that in the future episodes when I get better camera equipment, but I think maybe testing it with animals that don't have per se a long lifespan, like rats or something, might be easier, and animals that are that breed really fast, so the generations start coming out really quick and you can start seeing significant differences versus an animal that lives to be like 60 years and has a paternal expectancy. That means that like how long the infant stays with, say, said parent, which some probably live for like 8 months with their parents before they go out on their own. So that might take a little longer of time. But dogs, foxes, horses, maybe some small birds like budgies or the parakeets, even though budgies can live to be in their 20s, though budgies are easy to breed. So that might be a cool way to start. Because I want to do something like that. Like what they're doing right now, I want to do something like that. But I might have to start off with birds. Because I do have a dog right now. He's under my bed right now. He's sleeping. I think he is. But yeah, that was really interesting. I really do like these kind of videos. They really do show a lot about how a lot of the stuff we have are for a reason. And how so many stuff changes, and that key defining difference of nature versus nurture, whether do you genetically inherit something or is it just something you learn over time, which I think they go hand in hand. I like to think they go hand in hand. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, like, comment, because I know I did. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Don't forget that. And peace.